spring where, very much we scrambled to move most of our classes online. And as we had some time over the summer, basically my dean told me, okay, we have to figure out how in the fall semester can we provide a quality experience for our students, right? It was very clear that a lot of our courses would still be online in the fall semester. And so I spent a lot of time this summer thinking about, as a school, how do we develop a philosophy and a framework to really deliver quality content online. So again, I'm going to talk to you both as an associate dean as well as a faculty member, because I also started teaching then in the fall. So I had to, in some sense, do what I preached. And so I'm going to give you sort of both perspectives, really here as a user for Ment.io and also as somebody who's sort of evaluating, can we use Ment.io more broadly in the school?
May
So
I just ask, Enno,
yeah,
if you could move to presentation mode on your, exactly. Thank you so much.
this is actually,
For those of us with
this
short
is there's an interesting notion to this. I usually don't do presentation mode anymore when I do webinars or teach online, because Microsoft is very jealous about the screen.
I
But
think you might want to revert to the older mode, to the previous mode, because this one is showing us both the current slide and the next one. So
there
maybe
you
that,
go.
yes, this is
So
better.
I think this is fine.
Apologies.
Anyways, these are all the lessons we learned the hard way this fall. Anyway, so for the next 20 minutes or so, I want to talk a little bit about what led us to Ment.io. I want to talk about, in some sense, a conceptual framework here on breadth versus depth, on why I think Ment.io provides benefits to our students. I want to briefly talk about Ment.io from the perspective of instructor in terms of following online discussions, and also about assessing online discussions. And in the end, I'll briefly conclude with sort of where we are and what we think about the software. So let me start off with this slide over here. And again, this is all in the context of how do we, at the scale that we're at, deliver quality online content for our students. And I think as instructors, we're very good about thinking about instructor to student conversations and communications, right? We structure our courses around, what do I want students to take away from what I'm saying, and how can I react to what students are saying? And that's really an important part of every course. But there's another aspect of every course, which is student-to-student interactions. And I'm sure, I saw that you're from many different fields. I mean, in the business school in particular, but I think in many other fields this is true too. Students benefit a lot from each other. And this is not just about understanding kind of the diversity of opinions that exists out there, but this is also about kind of real experiences, right? So we get MBA students who come from multiple different industries. Usually they have 5 or 6 years of work experience, and students benefit tremendously from being able to share these experiences with each other. And so how do we do that in an online environment? Because this happens somewhat naturally when we're in a face-to-face environment, right? Students sit next to each other, they start chatting, they hang out after class, they see each other in student clubs. There's a lot of social networking going on, and so they learn a lot from each other. But in an online setting, a lot of that is really gone, right? So they have a void there in terms of their interaction with classmates. Particularly our students that started this fall have never really kind of physically met their peers in the classroom before, right? So how do we think about meaningful student-to-student interaction? That was sort of what was in the back of my head. And in particular, I mean, I knew discussion forums are a way of accomplishing this, right? So in a discussion forum, we post questions, and then throughout the week, in a very asynchronous kind of way, students interact with questions, interact with each other, start understanding sort of who knows what in the classroom, what are the different opinions. So discussion forums are a great way of structuring this, but to be honest, nobody was happy with the discussion forums that we had. So we use Canvas, and Canvas is a fantastic software. But I asked around our faculty members that had been using the discussion forums on Canvas, and they're all like, "Yeah, It's basically, I get a lot of answers. I don't think students read what the other students are posting. I can't even follow it. I have, 60, 80 students in my class. The moment I post a question, it just sort of blows up, and I don't really know how to grade all of this. And so there was a lot of sort of, yeah, I mean, somewhat discontent with the existing discussion forums. We had alternatives as well as Piazza, which we have access to, and I looked into that for a while. And I think it's a good software if you want to, let's say, if you want to jointly work on a proof, then it's sort of very good for students. It's kind of like it's good about sort of creating joint wiki pages, if you will. But it didn't seem like a general solution to what we wanted to accomplish with our discussions. So when Ment.io started appearing on my horizon, that was late in the summer, really. I kind of immediately realized, okay, this is something different. Maybe this is more useful than what we had on Canvas. So I very quickly got in touch with the team at Ment.io and recruited 7 of our faculty members to really sort of serve as lead users within the school to see whether we could effectively use Ment.io, particularly to drive student-to-student interaction, right? And so what I mean with that, I really think, if you think about a discussion forum, you can think about sort of breadth and depth of what happens in the discussion forum, right? Breadth is basically the number of answers to a question that you're getting, and depth is the, how much are people interacting with each other in these answers, right? And so if you think about it, again, the standard problem in discussion forums is you get a lot of breadth and very little depth, right? So you pose a question and students essentially think about this question as a homework question, right? So like you pose a question, okay, and they write an essay onto it and that's it. And that's not really the purpose of a discussion forum. You could have asked that in a homework set, right? So I think the moment you get into that mode, you really, you kind of missed the point of a discussion forum. So for me, the question was, how can we get from this world to this world, right? Where we have maybe fewer answers, but in each answer, we go into much more depth, right? So, and this is really, I think, something where Ment.io is sort of designed around, right? How can we get from essentially this world where we have students treating a discussion forum literally as a way of submitting a homework set answer to a way where they engage with each other throughout the week and really sort of go deeper in some of these questions, right? So that's, I think, what Ment.io is designed to do. And there's a couple of mechanisms embedded in Ment.io that help along those lines, right? So to give you an example over here, this is sort of the standard interface that you see when you interact with Ment.io as an instructor. And I just finished teaching a project management class, and here are sort of 6 of the or 5 of the questions that I posed to my class in as a part of that class. And you can see, again, sort of for each question, you can see here the number of answers and the number of comments, which is basically what I mean with breadth versus depth. You can see that you get, I had about 61 students in class, and I usually get about 7 to 10 answers. So that's really, not everybody's providing an answer, but I get, 80 or 90 comments. So everybody is responding to other answers and reading other answers. So this is really where I wanted things to be in the discussion. And this didn't happen right from the start. I mean, the very first question I posed, I got about 30 different answers until I intervened and said, take a look at how Ment.io is designed and what it tracks. You're really supposed to collaborate. It's okay. You don't have to post your own answer. You can just respond to other people's answers. That's really what is important about the software. So some of it is not just the software, it's also about how you interact with students, of course. So you have to kind of make students aware about this. But once they kind of take a closer look at the software, they get it. And again, within sort of a week or so, I got them into this equilibrium where they really were not necessarily providing their individual answers, but they were interacting with each other. So I'm going to take one of these questions over here because I think it's a nice and interesting one that I posted. Will face-to-face launch meetings still be important in the post-COVID world? So this was a question where there was quite a bit of kind of reading as well as sort of asynchronous online content centered on the question of, in project management, what do you do with a launch meeting? Why is it important? What purpose does it serve? and sort of the literature there was very much geared towards suggesting that this needs to be face-to-face. And so I posed the question to students over here, all right, do you think this is still going to be the case after COVID? So I thought this was, I mean, on the one hand, I think this question has sort of two angles to it, right? The first angle is it allows students to vent out of like, oh, I can't wait for COVID to be over and the world to be normal again. And yes, we're going to go back to face-to-face meetings. So there's sort of an emotional connection to it, but there's also a deeper point to it, which is, okay, why are face-to-face meetings important from a communications perspective? Why does this matter, and particularly for these launch meetings in a project? And what can technology do right now to fulfill those objectives instead? So is it actually feasible to have these meetings in an online context, right? So that's really sort of the essence of this question that I wanted students to get into. And so when you, as an instructor, you can take a look, and this is basically, these are the answers that were submitted, right? And you can see every answer is actually ranked by Ment on a quality score. And the quality score is somewhat complex, but in a nutshell, it really looks at, you know, how well are students discussing with each other on this answer, how much disagreement is there, how much clarity is there, and how much are responsive sort of substantiated by additional data and external links, etc. So a lot that goes into this quality score. But you can sort of immediately see, okay, there's a couple of high quality discussions where that score was 10, and there's a couple of lower quality score discussions where that score was 5. And then for each,
Enno,
yes,
just 1 second of comment here from Mentayo as we go deeper into the details. I'm sure that you might have some questions. So you are aware of the Q&A part of the Zoom. I want to encourage each of you that has a question for Enno or for Anat to ask them over the Q&A. We will review them and answer them right after the presentation. So please ask as many questions as you'd like. We were happy to take them. And the stage is back yours, Enno. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes, by all means, we'll go into more details. But I wanted to give you sort of a sense for how the interface in some sense looks like. You can see that for every question, sort of basically every answer and every response, students can interact with it by upvoting or downvoting. They can mark something as insightful, right? Which is sort of this idea button over here, this light bulb. You can see how many people have sort of viewed this particular question or this particular instance here. And then you can view all replies, and you can add your own reply. Now, sort of one important thing about adding your reply is that Ment.io forces all students to either agree or disagree with something. So answers have to be posted in a way that they can be agreed or disagreed with. So it's a little bit of this notion of forcing a Socratic debate, where instead of everybody being like, okay, this is a great point and thank you for sharing, we actually try to encourage people to say, yes, this is good because, or no, I don't think this is the right answer because. So this is of course a bit uncomfortable, right? I live in the Midwest where people try not to disagree with anybody. So it took me a little bit of coaching to get students to the point where they felt comfortable disagreeing. So again, this was something where in the beginning of the semester, there was just a lot of agreement. And then I sort of pointed that out, and I made an announcement and told everybody that it was okay to disagree respectfully. And then the mode shifted a little bit. So people started disagreeing a little bit more. So of course, then you can click on an answer and you get the whole stream here of how people respond to it. You can see over here by the sort of green light associated with every answer, this is one where people were very much in agreement. Of course, again, for every response here, you get the same sort of interface where people can upvote, downvote, vote something as being insightful, ask for clarification. And you can see how many people have viewed that particular answer. So you sort of get a good sense for, okay, which responses here really kind of attracted a lot of attention. Again, the insightful buttons are actually, I think, a good tool because you can quickly see, all right, that's even something beyond sort of upvote and downvote where people really say, okay, there's something unique about this answer. So you can kind of zoom in and figure out what people were responding to over here. So this is just sort of the broad interface of how students interact with the software. Now I want to give you a sense for the timeline of how I structured things. So I would usually post a set of 2 questions on a Friday. And then these questions were accompanied by a simultaneous release of some asynchronous content, which is either sort of pre-recorded videos or sometimes readings that students were supposed to complete over the weekend until sort of the next Wednesday, when I had my next lecture scheduled for Wednesday and Thursday. I would usually do a content check-in on Ment.io on Sunday or Monday, or take a look, what have people posted? Is there something that I need to comment on? Is there some clarifications that need to be made? And then I would do another content check-in sort of after my lectures were over. I still gave students all the way until the Sunday afterwards to kind of continue interacting with the discussion. I would usually close it on Sunday evening or Monday morning, write a wrap up after each discussion, and kind of check in how everybody responded to the question. Up here, I give you sort of a little bit of an overview on when students interact with this, right? So you can see some activity here sort of right from the start. Then, needless to say, activity kind of is maximum just before my lectures on Wednesday and Thursday. Then it goes down a little bit, and then they pick it up again on the weekend. So this was sort of how students interacted, or the timing of when students interacted with Ment.io. Now, so this should hopefully give you a bit of a sense for how does the interface look like, and how do you integrate this into what you do in the classroom, right? I think establishing this kind of rhythm is actually quite important. Ment.io does have a little bit of the I wouldn't say an issue, but it's an aspect of it where students that post early in some sense get rewarded, because a lot more people are going to read what they're posting than students who post very late. And so I think students figure that out, and so they need to know the rhythm with which you post, so that they know when to check, when are basically new questions there, when should I reserve some time to actually post answers or respond to what others have been doing. And so I think students really sort of appreciated having this regular rhythm with which new questions were posted in the class. Now, here's an important aspect. As an instructor, you need to follow these discussions, right? And if you have 61 students, or 64 students, I think, in my class, if you want to read everything that people post, it's a lot of work. And it can, and particularly if people don't really go into different discussions, right? If you read the same argument for the 20th time, I'm sure everybody in this room has experienced this. You start going slightly insane, right? So you want to have as an instructor, you need to have a mechanism of how you can quickly get to the most important things that are being posted. And so Ment.io gives you the highlights over here. So this is for the same discussion, just a snapshot of the highlights. So you can see from these icons over here, you can see these kind of red and green bubbles. That means here's a comment on an answer that led to agreement and disagreement. So that's interesting, right? You always want to check out what's going on when students start arguing with each other. You want to check that out. And these light bulb bubbles over here, of course, they indicate, okay, here's something that here's a post that somebody made that the students found particularly insightful. So that's probably something you need to check out too, right? And here the star button usually means, okay, here's somebody who in the past has made very high quality contributions. So maybe you should check that out too, right? So it gives you a good sense for where, as an instructor, if you want to kind of frequently check in to see what's going on in your discussions, this is a very good tool where you can sort of keep up to date with respect to what are some of the new things that are being posted and what is really actually happening in the discussion that is sort of meaningful, right? So that's a good tool. Another tool is you can actually get a participant list and see the activity of each participant. So you see for everybody in the classroom, what's their activity and what's the quantity and quality in some sense of their activity, right? So you can see, for example, over here, there's one student who had 40 sort of activities. And really, once you look into the details over here, it's just one comment and 39 votes. So you're like, okay, here's somebody who's really, really active in terms of voting, but only made one comment. So you can take a look over here. The comment, yeah, it's sort of okay, but it was made pretty late. So this was somebody who started looking at the discussion very, very late, read a lot and interacted a lot in terms of upvoting, but didn't really add a lot in terms of sort of the comments to the discussion, right? So you can kind of get a sense for what the individual students are doing. So You can see which people do a lot on the discussion forum, who doesn't really do a whole lot on the discussion forum. And so this gives you a good sense for, are there some students that you should have a conversation with, that they should rethink about how they interact with the discussion forum, right? So these are sort of the kind of regular maintenance tools, if you will, that Menti.io gives you to really manage what is happening in your discussions. Now, one thing that I had to explain to students, but I think it's quite powerful, every student gets this kind of chart where Ment really measures them on these 6 different dimensions. And some of them are pretty straightforward, right? Activity is just like, how much do you do on the discussion? Thoroughness is sort of how much do you actually share reasoning? So do you comment? Do you sort of add additional data in your comments, etc.? Or do you just vote, right? So that's the thoroughness of your interaction. Balance is, do you always agree? Do you always disagree? Or do you sort of balance these 2 things? Clarity is about, do you get clarification requests from your peers or from your instructor? Collaborativeness, I think that's another very important one. Do you always interact with the same people, or do you interact with different people throughout the class, right? So oftentimes you can get group things or small cliques within a discussion forum, and it's just them interacting with each other. Then again, they're not really learning from the other peers. So there's a metric here where students know, okay, Menti.io will pick it up if I always just look at the post from the same people and interact with the same people. And finally, sort of believability here is, and this is a little bit complicated, but overall it measures, more or less how much do others really interact with what I'm saying? Do they, does it create a lot of agreement, a lot of disagreement? What confidence do people seem to have in my answers, right? So these are sort of the 6 things that Menti.io measures. And I have to walk students through this, right? So students need to understand it, and then they can check it actually in real time. They can see, okay, what are my scores? So this helps a lot, again, in terms of pushing people to, not just post answers, but interact with others and constantly interact with other people on the discussion forum. So what you get as an instructor in the end is sort of 5 scores for every student. So for every student, you get the overall quality score, you get the percentage of discussions that they interacted with, you get the collaboration score, you get sort of their views in terms of how much they viewed the content posted by others, and you get their actions, so their activities, right? And so I've given you the distribution here from my class, and you can see that there's quite a lot of variance. So what I found very useful here is, okay, I get these metrics automatically, and I can use them to, in the end, assess how students did in terms of their participation. I don't just take these scores and that's my participation grade, right? But I look at them and see how much they match of what I've read throughout in the discussion forum, and so I adjust them for sure, but I think they're a great starting point in terms of assessing students. And the last thing I sort of want to mention, I think what's exciting about this, and this is again a little bit less me, the instructor, a little bit more me, the associate dean. This actually measures some things that we've always been interested in terms of the dynamics of a cohort, right? Do we have just small cliques of people that interact with each other, or is it a broad cohort? Do we have individuals who always disagree, or who always agree? Do we have people who are generally active and people who are not so active in the discussions? I mean, as instructors, we sort of get a sense for this in our class, and there's a program, you watch this, and maybe you deliver a little bit of an intuitive sense for what's happening in your cohort, but you never really had a whole lot of data on this, right? So with Ment.io, if you use Ment.io persistently in a program, you start collecting data on this over time. And so you can actually start coaching people, right? You can tell people, hey, you're always just interacting with the same group. Maybe you should broaden up a little bit more. Or you're very agreeable. You're always just agreeing with things. It's okay to disagree. Just, try it out a couple of times, see to what kind of discussions it leads. It's actually quite interesting. Again, every time disagreement happened in my discussions on Ment.io, it's always been quite respectable. So nobody, people were always a little bit apologetic about disagreeing, but then very quickly went into the argument of why they're disagreeing. And it always led to interesting debates and I think to better learning. So once you can point that out, people will see like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. So I think again, from a coaching perspective, for coaching students in your cohort, there's a lot of interesting data here. So I'm going to wrap up soon, but I want to briefly share, what do our students think about this? So I surveyed my own students in class. And I specifically asked them, how does this compare to Canvas? So many of them had a lot of experience using discussion forums and Canvas. And the vast majority here said that this was a lot better than Canvas. So overall, students were quite happy with it. And again, so my conclusion here is it certainly helped drive deeper discussions in our classes. It was, for me as an instructor, I think, more productive because I could follow the discussions more easily. I could also grade their participation more easily. I mean, this is otherwise a huge barrier to really putting a lot of weight on discussion forums, because how do you grade it, right? It's very, very subjective. But here I start getting some scores to see how people interacted with the forum, the quality of the interactions with others. So I felt more confident in assigning a grade to it. And again, overall, it seemed to be a good student experience. I mean, the majority of students liked it, liked the interface. And so for me, overall, this has been, I think, a successful pilot. And, you know, I will certainly continue speaking with other instructors in our school and see if they want to adopt the software and give it a try. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Enno. I loved looking at how you work with Menti.io, and I think very unsurprisingly, you're highlighting all these super important issues that we constantly face as we try to do this remote teaching in a way that is both useful and has depth to it and is engaging and collaborative and empowering. This thing that you're mentioning about how do we coach the students to be better students and better discussants and better of better analytical skills, I think that is absolutely key to the platform. So thank you for this very, very insightful presentation and very clear. Thank you so much. Before I'll continue to kind of show a few of the elements that you couldn't show because because of your student privacy, I will be able to show a demo room to highlight some of the aspects that you talked about. We'd like to continue with the theme of understanding the audience here, right? The folks that are taking such an active part in writing questions and writing in the chat. So we'll pop up a poll any second now. And please take a minute or so to answer. It's only 3 questions. And I think it revolves around these areas that you just, that you were touching upon, Enno. The first one is, of course, what is the greatest challenge when remote teaching? And I'll be answering as I see it as well, because, you know, I find it highly relevant. And then we're asking you, of course, whether you have used traditional discussion boards. Enno had touched upon that. Really interesting to learn. We'll be showing results in a second, right? Once you finish answering these 3 quick questions, we'll be portraying the results. And so we'll be able to, both Enno and myself will be able to answer questions after understanding a little better what the audience feels about these aspects. So let's take 30 seconds more.
Okay. So while people answer their survey, again, this is Zvika from the Menti.io team. I've been answering your questions over the chat and over the Q&A. Just to tell you that all of your questions are being logged. There's already a few questions that I marked here for questions for Enno, and they will be addressed soon, as well as questions that we see on the chat about Menti.io pricing and how you can use it. We are very happy that you find it exciting and appealing. So just to give you a sense of what we are planning for the remainder of the session, Anat will run a 5 minutes demo just to show you a bit about the product. and then we will quickly start addressing questions one by one. Please continue to send out questions via the Q&A. I know that Enno and Anat are very excited to address them, and we will also be able to present to you the promotions that we have available for the webinar participants, and I hope that you will like that. So please keep sending us questions, and we will address them in about 5 to 6 minutes after Anat finishes the demo. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay, so let's have a look at these results. So most of you are, the greatest challenge that you identify is student engagement. I'm completely with you on that. And I kind of think that collaboration coming up as the second most important element is sometimes part of that engagement. You could create part of that engagement through students speaking to one another. I'm happy to hear also, Enno, what you think of this. And traditional discussion boards you can see here, and most of you are teaching both fall semester and spring semester. So it's really interesting to see and to learn about your experiences. Now, let me move very, Anna, would you like to say something about this, or should I? Okay, so I'll go directly to showing maybe 2 quick elements on Menti.io to kind of complement what Enno was so gracefully sharing with us. Let me click the share. So this is what a Menti.io room or discussion team looks like, and you can see the name of the class here, and you can see the different discussion questions. Enno's screenshots were much nicer because they are actual rooms. This is a demo room based on a real story, as they say, but still the reality is always better. And if I go into one of these discussions, what I'll be able to show you is how you open a discussion on Menti.io, what that looks like. And this might be taking a while just because I might have used a room that is associated with the LMS, and I might not be logged in well enough. Sorry, let me check that. Okay, so this is okay. This is, by the way, how it works from within the LMS, regardless whether this is Moodle or Canvas or something else. You just load it as an external tool if the university enables that, and the students have no login whatsoever. They just click what I am clicking on my screen, and that takes us directly into the Menti.io discussions. Normally does. Since it doesn't, I'll move to this room, and I'll just show you this is a different room that we opened not too long ago to discuss issues around remote teaching. And I'll just show you a few, but maybe this is not the best room to show assessment from, which is what I wanted to show you. How do I do that? Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties. Just a second. Okay, so I'll show you at the moment, I'll show you 2 quick things. One is the fact that when you'd like to open a discussion, what you need to do is basically click on that plus discussion. You write your question. It could be anything. What is most important in remote teaching, sorry, this is the remote teaching. And I can add background and attachments. And once I post a question, it's just there. It would appear like any one of these questions. And as Enno had shown you, any of the participants, any of the students who go on the discussion, and I see that I have a problem, it might be a bandwidth problem here, so I can't really show you, I apologize. So I'll just talk about 2 main aspects of Menti.io. One is to say that when the assessment that Enno was talking about is a feature on the platform that includes the different elements or different components of participation. There are 5 components. 2 of them, there are 6, but 5 of them are being calculated into the assessment grades suggested. 2 of them are based on participation, on actual engagement. Do I take part in discussions, and am I active on the platform? 2 of them are based on collaboration. One of them is, do I read what others are writing, which I find to be an extremely important component of how do you create new knowledge and how do you engage in discussions. So how many answers by others have I read? And the second element of that collaboration is how much do I respond to others? So take a second to think about that. That means that 4 out of the 5 components of assessment are based on engagement and collaboration, meaning that if you want to excel, if a student, and we all have different types of students, right? Those who struggle and those who somehow can bring the best answers into play very, very quickly and very easily. So these 4 components enable everyone to shine in some ways. And the 5th component, who is the quality score that Enno had mentioned, is the one that is revolves more around, did I bring forward arguments that others have created a meaningful discussion or a deep discussion around? So these 5 components are suggested as, and they are being aggregated to an overall score on Menti.io. And we see many of our instructors using these components to produce participation grades. And as Enno had mentioned, you basically have the freedom to say, well, I don't value collaboration that much that I want it to be in the grading, so I'm taking that out and leaving different weights to the other 4 components, for example. I haven't seen anyone doing that yet, I have to say, but because I think everyone values these elements, but I have seen many, many instructors looking, first of all, it varies between 10% participation to 40% participation based on Menti.io. And I've also seen many instructors during the semester looking at the assessment to see what they need and what they need to put emphasis on and how they can help the students, which leads me to the last thing that I'll say. There's a page on Menti.io which is called My Analytics, where students can see how they're doing. So it's not just my role to tell them, well, you can do better on how many discussions you take part in. The student can go on My Analytics, visit My Analytics page, and see that they have participated only on 70% of the discussions. And they know that they should go to the rest of the discussions and take part in them, and their assessment will be higher. So alongside that, there are different managing tools of the discussions, but I think I'll leave it at that and open the floor to Q&A. And thank you for being patient with me and my technology at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much, Anat. Thank you, Enno. Zvika here again. I've listed at least 4 or 5 questions that I want Anat and Enno to address, but because I see a repeating question here asked by many of the participants, then I want to be very specific about the promotions that we have for Menti.io. So we opened a dedicated email address for all of you, which is webinars@Menti.io. You can actually email us right after that to webinars@Menti.io. And you are going to get 2 very interesting promotions. One is that you will get 25% off for all of the prices that you will see in the websites. The base price starts for $129 a month, and you will get an additional 25% off. But I think the very interesting additional promotion that we want to offer is that if any of you that is preparing for the next semester, that is preparing for the spring semester, if you decide to choose Ment and buy and pay for now and pay for the spring semester before the end of October, you will get the fall semester included for free. So you can use Ment for the remainder of this semester by committing to the following semester. So you're actually getting almost double the amount, double the license. So this is very relevant for those who are planning towards the spring semester. And again, any questions that you have, please feel free to email us at webinars@Menti.io, and we would love to be in touch and give you a specific offer. Enno, if you don't mind, I'll start shooting questions your way.
All right.
So there's an interesting question coming from Larry Holiday. I hope I pronounced his name right. And that's talking about preparation before class. How do you time your questions to the students? How do you prepare? When do you send out the questions? And what do you expect to get from the students to actually think before your class about something? So what's your thought process on preparation for a class?
That's a good question. And it goes a little bit back to the timeline that I had in my presentation, right? So to be clear, I had my classes on Wednesdays and Thursdays. And so the class was over on Thursday afternoon, essentially. And then on Thursday evening, I would post the question for the next week, right? So the questions would be there always on Thursday evening. Students could rely upon that. And at the same point of time, I would start posting, or basically they knew which asynchronous content to watch and read that would go along with the question. Right, so then they had Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday to really sort of engage in the asynchronous content and write on the discussion forum. And then we would usually pick up some of what would be discussed in lectures, either again on Wednesday or Thursday. So we would have some time, spend some time in the synchronous lectures to talk about the content. And then they still had Friday, Saturday, Sunday to continue with the discussion forum, and I would then close on Sunday. So it was really quite some time during which students could kind of visit the discussion forums and interact with them. And it was sort of, the discussion was in some sense overarching. You know, you could draw both on the asynchronous content that was part of the class as well as the synchronous content that was part of the lecture.
And if I may, I'd like to add to that, and now actually share my screen and show you what I mean. I'd like to add to that when you're preparing to use some of Menti.io insights into the discussion, and what you're seeing here is an example of a question and different answers with their comments. As Enno demonstrated earlier, first thing that I do when I prepare to the synchronous class is to look at this and look at, for example, this is insightful. I'm pressing that little line and I get to this, which is marked insightful or best answer. And I use some of these highlights in the synchronous class. So I take that and I use that in the classroom. It also gives the students the sense that this is A, work in progress, but B, being noticed, even though I'm not taking an active part in the discussions. In addition to that, and this is also, Enno had shown this, the activity log of what students are doing, I can also filter by specific student. So when I'm preparing to class and I know that I'd like to hear from a particular student, I can filter only according to what they had written and refer to that in class. And of course, I can also see who are the ones that are taking, that are being most active on Menti.io discussions versus the synchronous classes, and use that in my teaching. So that's just a little addition to that question.
Thank you, Anat. Another question coming from Begimai Malenova. It's about how to motivate students to engage in the software. If you have some tips and tricks that you want to share, Enno. Sure.
And again, it really just took a week to get them into the right mindset, but you should expect a week. So I think that the things that are important, I actually recorded a video where I explain the 6 different dimensions that Menti.io measures. And, people realize that, what is being measured drives behavior, right? So they can see, they want me to do this, they want me to do that. Okay, that's interesting. So I think once I pointed out what is actually measured and how they can get feedback on these measures, and that I see those measures too, right? That I think was sufficient to give them the message of, you don't need to post your own answer. Really, so I made it explicit. If there are already 10 answers out there, chances are that those answers already contain of what you want to really express in your answer. Then rather go deeper to some of these answers and explore some facets of it and see if you agree or disagree with them. Right. So that took some explaining, but again, students got that very quickly. And the other aspect was really sort of this notion of disagreement. There was a lot of students who said, well, you know, the answers are so long, I might disagree with something of it, but overall I agree with it. And then I said, well, that's fine. Just say disagree and say, while I overall agree with your answer, here's a particular aspect of it that I disagree with. And once people sort of realize that they can sort of pick aspects about a question that they can sort of focus the disagreement on, more disagreements happened. And as I said, it was usually, and students also realized that once they disagreed, that's when the interesting discussions started happening. So you could see some students in particular sort of started having fun with that and engaging with each other in that way.
Thank you. And again, I'd like to add two very quick elements to that. This page that I'm sharing with you is named My Analytics, as you can see, and it is the description of the analytics dedicated only to that particular student. So team analytics is visible to everyone. They can see the level. And I'm relating to the point of how do you basically empower the students to improve and to take ownership over what they do in the platform. So part of it is the fact that they can see collaboration through the entire team and discussion quality and additional elements. The more important aspect, as Enno had noted, is the fact that they can see different elements of their behavior and how they change over time. This is, of course, not static. This changes as they continue to contribute on the discussions. And one additional important element to my mind is the fact that when I start using Menti.io with my students, I share with them the notion of the assessment spreadsheet as I receive it. So they understand not only the My Analytics, but also the fact that this is what I see. I see the different, you're seeing the one that isn't being measured, right? The one that is how balanced they are, because we don't grade them on that, but they are able to see how their actions affect the grade, how many discussions they took part in, the collaboration with others and reading what others are writing, as well as the quality score. And once they understand the notion of that, they see both that it's up to them to drive this, and that I, as Enno is saying, I'm overviewing this thing. That makes this very powerful, a very powerful tool for the students.
Thank you, Anat, for that. Another question coming from Stefan Edward McMillan. Enno, he's specifically asking about how you take all of the parameters that MENT provides you, including the quality score, and how do you decide what is the best way to incorporate that in the overall grading of the student?
I would say for me, I mean, I only have one experience with that so far, so this is a bit work in progress, not that I really have best practices here. But I mean, the first thing I did is, because I read a lot of these posts and I kept sort of track on like, okay, what were some of the really good ones? And I correlated that with the quality score from Menti.io to kind of get a look at like, does it actually match with what MENT is measuring? And that gave me some confidence to, yeah, there's something meaningful here, right? And then I would take a look at it. So sometimes I would have the opposite, right? I would have students who had a high quality score, but I hadn't actually, there's no response here from them that I had in my memory that was particularly memorable. So I would go back, and then now I know, okay, let's figure out what happened with the student. And this is usually then related, okay, this was a student who did a lot of voting, but there was not a lot of substantive comments that were being made. And so I could track, okay, this was a student who usually logged on very late and did a lot of votes, but actually didn't post a whole lot. So then I downgraded that score. So I think it was a little bit on, you know, I mean, I did spend some time reading the posts as well, and understanding really here who was contributing interesting things and who was contributing things that weren't super interesting, right? So I think you should see about these metrics as a starting point, right? I think that the data, you shouldn't take them one-to-one and post them. That's your participation score. This is not really how this is designed to be. It's, I think, as an instructor, it gives you sort of a good orientation, but I think you still have to do some work in terms of understanding who are the people that you really need to kind of reward and who are the people who were trying to game the system a little bit, right? So, again, for me, this is also still a bit of a learning exercise. I don't think I would want to make this fully automated. There's a lot of risk in terms of turning assessments over to an algorithm. So I would encourage everybody to sort of keep a voice in that process and to have a check of reasonable, to just sort of see whether things are reasonable.
I completely agree, and would like to highlight with that the fact that also when you have the ability as the instructor to close the discussion, and that is also in a way of saying, well, the scoring for the answers, it has done its thing, but now I, as the human being here, can say, well, I'm basing my answer, you see there's a recap discussion, I'm basing my answer on this answer because that's the one leading to my next class, and that's the one that is interesting to me, and then I can post the conclusion.
Certainly. Maybe just because we have time to take one or two more questions, I want to start by saying that for those of you who we did not get to address their questions live, be sure that we are happy to be in touch following the webinar and continue this discussion because it's really, really interesting. I see questions coming from Colin Jennings and from Laurie asking about whether there are like free versions of the software, highlighting like budget constraints that some education institutions still have. So we are happy to work with you on that. Ment.io is a paid product, but we do help instructors get to the budget holders and approve some financial use case for that. I think, relatively speaking, it's a great value for money, but it is a paid product. We are happy to be in touch and see what is the best path forward for those of you who see that. I just feel like I need to address another question coming from Gabby Richard Harrington about whether students can see the scoring as it happens. So one of the things that we try to do here at Ment.io is, on one hand, give the students the ability for self-improvement. So any student can go into their own personal analytics and see how they progress on the 6 different axes that Enno has presented, how collaborative they are, how credible, how active, how balanced they are, for example. And they can actually self-coach them or even talk to the professor and see how can they improve. But we still also reserve parts that are only for the instructors, for example, the assessment. So the overall analytics about how a student participates is something that the professors see, and they can decide how to engage and whether to share this information with the students. But we do want to give the instructor a more aggregated view of what's going on in class. So I would say, Gabi, that this is a hybrid of both, and I hope this answers the questions. Anything else that anyone wants to say, please email us or ask us. I'll obviously happy to give it to Anat and Enno back for any closing remarks. And on our end, really appreciate and thank you for your participants. And again, please feel free to reach out. We are happy to continue this discussion. Anat, Enno?
Thank you, Zvika. Enno, would you like to share a concluding remark or remarks?
I just want to, the mere fact that you are here in this panel means that you care about your students. And again, this has been a hard year for higher ed across the world, really. And, there's a big thanks to all of you for caring about your students, caring about the quality of our education. For me, has been intellectually very interesting to see what we can do from a technological perspective to drive better discussions, right? That's why I'm here. And I would say Ment.io has been a really promising product in those regards. So again, thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Enno. Thank you for being here, and thank you, all of you participants, as Enno is saying, and I couldn't agree more, for caring enough to take the time and energy to be here today. I think we are on a quest to increase engagement, collaboration, quality for students around the world. And I'd like to thank Enno wholeheartedly for sharing your thoughts with us today and your experience, and all of you for taking part. Please keep safe and be well. Thank you so much for being here today.